Good morning, everyone. You've wandered into the NANOG BCOP track, the best current operational practices. So hopefully that's where you're meant to be. Thanks. First of all, just kind of a quick show of hands. Who has been to a BCOP track before? Okay, and who has not been to a BCOP track ever before? Wow, awesome. Okay, so that's going to change the beginning a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing here and why. Most of the information, if you want to kind of follow along, is at bcop.nanog.org for now. What we're really trying to accomplish here is taking all of the great material, the presentations and knowledge that is swarming around NANOG and condense that into actual written form that you can then reference later. What we find right now is that many times when you want to look up how to do something, maybe you're configuring BGP for the first time, maybe you're setting up ISIS on a network and you've only run OSPF, whatever the case may be, there's always times where we need to do something. Maybe you're setting up a DNS server, right, and you're a router guy. And that information's out there, obviously, right? The internet's running quite well, and the people who come to these meetings are some of the ones who make that all happen. We give presentations to each other, we talk about things in the hallway, and if you know the right guy to ask, it's fairly easy to find this information. But if you don't, if you're new, if you're starting a network in Gambia, if you are working in a small company and don't have access to these kind of meetings, those resources are not available to you. And what we want to do is make that available to everyone. We want to help make the internet run better by writing down the way we're doing things, updating those documents frequently. There are going to be living documents so that you always know that it's the best current operational practice. So if you want to do something and it's written down in a BCOP, you know that you can at least start from there, right? There's always kind of an 80-20 rule. There's going to be exceptions to everything. Some people do things differently than others. Some people use different things to be distinguishers in their network or are in corner cases for whatever reason and need to change things. But we want these to cover, most of the time, this is the best way to do things, and then agree on that as a community and then publish them as a community. So it's really for engineers, by engineers, a really open, transparent, bottom-up process. With all that being said, if you think that's a good effort, it'd be worthwhile to get as involved as you can. We'd really appreciate that. Right now, the wiki and the fact that there's a committee at NANOG and all of that, there's some murkiness. We're getting mixed signals from the board as to whether or not this will continue as a NANOG activity. I'm confused by that because to me, if we're not here to talk about how to operate networks, I'm not sure what we're doing. But for your own feed for thought, drinking, there's some drinking going on. So for those of you who are first timers and those of you who have been here before, both, if this is something you see as important and is something that we should continue to do, I'd like to hear that. The other BCOP committee members would hear that, and I think the board should probably hear that. So without further ado, I want to move forward a little bit from there, from the kind of introductory stuff, and talk about some of the BCOPs. So we just published a new one, actually, after the last meeting, Ethernet OAM, which gives general Ethernet OAM orientation and guidelines. The idea is, again, like all BCOPs, it's really accessible. It's kind of just the bare bones of what you need to know to get started, and then references out to where to go from there. You can see the shepherd was Mark Calkins, one of our BCOP committee members, and a few, thanks, Mark, and a few subject matter experts here. And this is how the BCOPs work. So the way we write these is there's a shepherd always assigned who kind of steers the boat, makes sure everything, all the cats stay together, and then subject matter experts, which may or may not be the shepherd, are the ones who actually produce the content and write it. I've in the past, on the BCOPs I've written, I've pulled information that people have written in responses to questions on the NANOG mailing list and pulled them into a document and then told them, hey, guess what, you're an author on a document, thanks for replying to that email. Which is a really good way of getting people to write things. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to get people to write later on. But headline here, new BCOP. Again, it's at that site, bcop.nanog.org, if you want to check it out. There's a few others there. And we have some in progress. There's right now, I think, 4 documents. The maintenance notification is brand new, so it's not quite in progress, I guess, but it's something we're going to talk about today. So I want to pause here and actually switch over. And Yardiel, if you want to come talk about the DDoS and DOS attack BCOP, which is one of the ones that's had the most activity recently, I will hand it over to talk about this. I think that's, if I go full screen. There we go.
Got it. All right. All right. Just to give you an update on the DDoS attack, guys, we started this back last year. It was one of the first ones. After so much request for it, there was a lot of, you probably, if you follow the NANOG list, you probably see a lot of emails going about DDoS. It's always a recurrent topic that happens, right? So the idea was, well, we networking engineers, willingly or unwillingly, need to get involved with this. Besides the security guy, well, this is going on its own. So let me just go back here. And so there were some participants. I was a chaperone and helped a little bit on putting it all together, but credit goes to the SMEs there. And there are other people also that contributed, tried to keep us aligned and sharing the information that they've seen. Some of them are very experts on that, so they try to share stuff. So they're probably missing one name there too. On the summary, what is this BCOP intend to do? Really, it's just trying to put together in a cohesive way all the information we can for the dealing with DOS or DDoS, essentially making it like a set of steps. There's plenty of information. You can go into Google and you can spend the whole day, probably the whole week, just reading about it and becoming an expert at it, but that's not the goal, right? So we try to put it in a much better context. So if you want to go into the details, go into the BCOP page that Chris mentioned, and you'll find it there. Essentially, the idea is to create a clear list of steps of what you can do, right? When you are being under attack or you're thinking about it, you probably want to know what to do before, what to do during the attack, and what to do after the attack. So it's kind of like, oh my God, I'm getting attacked. What should I do? Should I read the whole Google stuff about DDoS, or what should I do? So the idea is, okay, here's a few steps that you may want to, some other people have tested it, they've used them before, and that's the idea. So whenever you go there, there's like 11 steps, actually 9 steps about what to do prior. One of them is about how to, and there's some with 10 steps about evaluating solutions and different vendors out there. Then there's a few of them that you can do during the attack, and there are very few of them because once you're attacked, that's it, you're done, man. After that, there's some what to do after, right? Some people start wondering about, okay, who should I report to? Who can I complain, right? Who can I just give him my whining? Who can help me on this? Can I just go to my police down the street, or what should I do? So we kind of go into that as well. So if you want to read it, essentially, the idea about this BCOP, we had a lot of comments. We sent some emails. If you're following the NANOG emailing list, we got a lot of comments back. We thought we were done. At least it's me. We all thought we were done, and then comments keep coming. Just like Chris says, this is a living document. The idea is for us to kind of share all the information and gather the information that can be useful in dealing with DDoS. So it is ratified. We talked about kind of ratified, done with this. It's not a draft anymore. But what the hell does that really mean, right? So it just means that it is just good enough to be implemented. It makes sense what we have there. We might be missing some details. Maybe we need to add some stuff here and there, but it is ready to really be shared for everybody. So that's what it really means. So what is the next step on that? It's a living document. We got to keep growing it, adding more stuff, questioning what we have there. Maybe this part is being used much more now. So that's what we're really trying to do. So if you feel like that you have some contributions to the whole community, if you have been a victim and you got some lessons learned, please share it with us. There's some other nice to add content there as well. It's not only about what to do before, during, and after it, but it's also about some of them things that I might missing in that BCOP is it would be good to know what approaches, if anybody has used in the community, that didn't work, that you thought, hey, this makes sense, this is the way it's going to stop it, right? Maybe UDP port 0. We talked a little bit about that, actually. Maybe that's the way, just block UDP block 0 because my DDoS mitigation appliance tells me we should do that. At least it's showing me in the screen, right? Well, that's not it. So it's things that if you know it of any of those things that did not work too well, we also want to include them in there. So feel free to share them with us. Your experience on the legal and the law enforcement agencies. I don't know if you had any, if you contacted the FBI. I know the standard answer from those guys is, yeah, we're interested, let us know, we want to know everything, right? Just like the NSA. But whether we're going to help you or not, that will be something else. And another thing also came up about adding to the BCOP was about maybe we should start educating people. Some of the stuff that is there, if you look at the BCOP, it's we try to really make it cohesive and methodically list of steps that make sense to you. So we're not trying to educate you, but if you've run networks for a bit, you understand what's going on there. But you don't find too much about what is really a DDoS for charging port. You don't find that stuff there. So some people suggested that as well. So if you do, feel free to share it and contribute to us. So comments are always welcome. And that's the last slide. Contribute, please, if you think that you have any current, if you've been a victim or maybe an attacker, who knows? If you can improve or missing anything that we have in the BCOP, your input is greatly welcome. If you created your little, back of the envelope, napkin lessons learned thing when you got attacked, and if you can share it with us, that'll be great. It will contribute to the whole effort. I think Chris noticed that in one of the things, it's being quoted and used internationally. So we want to keep using this as well. So get involved. Just email me or email the BCOP support email, and I'll get you in contact with the guys who are actually helping us too. And we just start a nice discussion. Okay? Any questions? Yeah. Fine.
Alexander Lemin. The question is the incident reporting itself. Do you have any standard practice how to do that so your incident report could be filed worldwide? Because right now we have an ongoing issue with group called DD4BC, DDoS for Bitcoin, and it seems like us as a team having a problem reporting it to FBI, FSB,
exactly.
and European enforcements. Yeah, and can we standardize it in ways that forensics that are vital still there and they are clearly readable to the authorities, because sometimes authorities lack of expertise, that's said realization also. So
well, sometimes they just don't want to tell you. They probably have the knowledge, they just don't want to,
So
they're like the security guys. They don't want to be anybody's friend.
What about what we should do to standardize it? So and also make a push so it's acceptable by law enforcement around the world.
Right. We actually wanted to. That was another suggestion. Thank you for bringing that up. It was trying to get somebody that is involved or know of law enforcement and who can help us and share it how to do that. If you notice in the NANOG mailing list, there was a lady that is an attorney, and she deals a lot with the FBI and the internet, and she was trying to help us with that. But if you know of anything, today it's not in the BCOP. If you can help us out.
I heard that there are some efforts from European government, French people doing something. I heard quite a coherent presentation at RIPE meeting in Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago. So probably I should grab your business card and introduce you to our little discussions that we have internally.
That'll be great.
Thank
Talking
you.
to the French then gets Americans to talk too, right, probably. Any more questions? Oh, go ahead.
Not a question. Could you just read that email? Does the blue on black?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I can't even read it myself, right? No, that's my email, is my first name. So let me go back at gmail.com, or just go to the bcop.nanog.org. You'll find it in the BCOP there, is my email, and the whole committee, the whole BCOP support committee is there as well. So you can email everybody. I'm just one of the, humble shepherds handling this one.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions, guys? Cool.
Thanks. Thanks, Ariel. And yeah, actually, that's interesting. This document is one that I was in Dhaka, Bangladesh, 2 weeks ago at the third Bangladesh Network Operators Group meeting, and there was a presentation about denial of service attacks. And then we just, I think, published this after the last NANOG meeting, so like 3 months ago. And on one of the slides in this gentleman's presentation at the BDNOG, he referenced this document. So as far as contributing and having you know, a little bit of cachet, it's sometimes fun to put your name on a document that has that kind of spread.
Also interesting side note, I noticed that there is a link to GitHub FastVPS fastnetmon, which is a NetFlow collector with DDoS up to layer 5 DDoS detection. And it's just a couple of weeks ago got new features which allow you to drill down to this particular minimal /24 which is affected. So there's lots of features coming in this particular piece of software related to the problem. And it's nice to see it on suggested software list.
We put it there, with one caveat. Since nobody's used it or anybody has given any feedback, we don't endorse it, we just mention it. So the BCOP says, here's some tools, open source tools that people are using. It's up to you if you want to use them.
It's also interesting that it's programmed by some pre-Baltic citizen, Pavel Odensov, his name, and we should probably invite him for a speech with description how to use this with like a master class, how to use this to detect and automatically mitigate attack. Because as on previous section I mentioned, this is really important because what we're seeing now is the rising trend of attacks on residential IP addresses, which don't run any public services, but it can affect a huge lot of people. We've seen small cities taken down for weekends in Russia. Same happens in Europe, and the culprit will be Steam service, Skype, and online games.
Very cool. And if I can have is Eric here to talk about there. Awesome. So we're talking about the maintenance notification. So to go from a BCOP that's at the end of the first cycle anyway, that's been published and is ready for revisions, to one that is brand new and talking about it for the first time here.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Klavan with Box. And as Chris mentioned, this is a rather new effort. We're just getting started in between the last meeting and this meeting with a lot of our discussions. The idea for this effort originally came to my knowledge at NANOG 60 at one of the Ice-Mageddon socials that we had there. Randy Niels did a lot of the initial effort to drum up interest in this area, so I want to thank him for that. Now, raise your hand if you or your organization receives maintenance notifications or you generate maintenance notifications, right? It's just about everybody. Everybody deals with this. Most of the time, we receive these messages via email. It's the common way that we send and receive them. And there's no real consistent format for these messages. Every vendor has a different format. They often format things differently depending on the service. And many of us manually process these notifications. Raise your hand if you've got a completely automated process for receiving the emails, for sending the emails. I saw one for receiving, one for sending.
No, I have a completely automated process, which is make someone else do it.
Ah, I see. Okay. That's a pretty good process. It's always nice when someone else solves the problem for you. Yeah. But what are some of the steps that we often take when we get these notifications? We often convert the time zone to something that makes sense for us. It may not be in the time zone that we like to think of from the perspective of the vendor. We might add calendar entries to some central calendar so we can see across all the different services from different vendors we have what the different maintenances are that are going on. We might open tickets in some internal system, either to track the maintenance or to track our response to it. And when we do all these things manually, we encounter the possibility for error. How many of you have generated or caused an outage because you've misconverted a time zone or lost a day on a maintenance window, right? I've done that.
I'm not going to admit it.
I'll admit to that, right? And all these things are time consuming. It takes a lot of time to look at that email, make sure you haven't performed an off by one error in your time zone computation, or, oh, I forgot that with that transition, it's really the next day. So we want to try to fix some of these issues. There's a huge opportunity here for improvement in efficiency. These are things that machines can do much better than we can, and if we're fine with making other people do it, why not make machines do it? But there are some significant barriers to doing this. All of these notifications, if a vendor has templates that they use to generate them, they're not standardized across all the different providers. The templates are often guidelines. They're not strictly followed by every vendor and internally. And these templates can change. Vendors may decide they want to adopt a slightly different format, and they don't tell anyone that they're doing that. So these are some of the challenges that we see and why we feel that there's a need for standardization and some consistency in this area. Our goals for this: we want to preserve the existing format. We think that there's a lot of value in human-readable format in the maintenance notifications. We want to make sure that that remains for anyone who wants to adopt this approach. We want to ensure that people can continue to consume the messages as they exist today without any additional trouble. So what we're looking to do is to add on some formatted information to those notifications in addition to what's already there. We want that formatted information to be machine parsable. That's the most important thing to enable automation. We also want it to be human readable. We want that formatted information to be something that you can easily tell is correct if you're the person working on generating it, or that your program is properly consuming it if you're on that end of things. And we want all of this to support tooling and automation. And we want it to be something that's general. We don't want it to be so specific that it only makes sense within the world of networking. We want it to be useful for other services like virtual machines or things of that nature. When we sent out our appeal to the BCOP mailing list, we got some great feedback from Matt Peterson and Chris Woodfield. They almost simultaneously suggested, hey, maintenances, they're kind of like events, and we have this protocol already, iCal, that we all use to schedule events across organizations. So why don't you look at using that? Don't reinvent the wheel. See if you can make something work with what's already there. So we looked into this, and we found that there's a lot of overlap. This looks like a good opportunity, so it's what we're pursuing. In particular, one of the things we like about iCal is that there's a format that's defined, and that's independent of the method of delivery. So we're all familiar with email attachments for calendar events. That's what we see most of the time. And there are some other methods of delivery, including a method over WebDAV called CalDAV that we think is useful for solving some problems we might encounter in the future around concerns related to security. And it turns out the RFC for formatting the calendar information, 5545, has a lot of great work in it for extensions. There's IANA registration possibilities as well as the traditional Xheader format for extensions. And to sort of summarize the value of iCal, it's really about compatibility with existing consumers. So if you add an email attachment to a maintenance notification that has iCal compatible information in it, that can be consumed by all existing iCal compatible programs today. And there's some immediate benefits that if you're speaking now on the vendor side, right, to your customers, there's an immediate benefit to sending these attachments. Your customers can get calendar entries automatically without any additional effort on their part. Progress to date. At first, we worked on trying to identify what we thought were fields that should be mandatory, that should always be present for this standard, and what we thought might be just optional, things that people can include if they wanted to, but they weren't really critical. So this is a list of the mandatory fields that we identified. Obviously, you need to know when the maintenance windows start and end. There should be a unique identifier for who the provider is. We found that some organizations have multiple units internally that consume the services of a single provider. So we thought including an account ID associated with the services on that maintenance would be helpful for dispatching internally. We need a maintenance ID that uniquely identifies this maintenance from every other maintenance that the provider has announced. And then all the objects that are going to be acted on by this maintenance. So in the context of networking, this could be circuit IDs or BGP IP peers or peer IPs. Or for other services, again, the IS example, this could be a virtual host ID or something of that nature. And then the impact. Is this service impacting? Is it advisory only, et cetera? We also worked on testing whether our theory of using extensions was going to work in the real world. So we came up with some mock emails with attachments for maintenance notifications. We ran those through a bunch of different systems, Apple Calendar, Outlook, Google Calendar. And what we discovered was there was really good support for these extensions in the sense that we could generate them and send them to these systems. The systems appropriately responded to all the standard iCal data and ignored all the X headers. So what this means is that you can use this approach to add in calendar information notifications. There's additional information that you can add to make sure that you can parse some critical fields in the notification, but the existing systems ignore those. They're there if you want to take advantage of it, but they don't impede anything if you don't. So this is an example of one of the tests that we ran. This is Google Calendar. On the right is a detailed view of the event with the detailed text description. This is the human readable part contained in the body. And as you can see, the start and end time is encoded in a time zone of Mountain Daylight Time. And as you would expect from a calendar application, that gets displayed and converted automatically to the appropriate local time zone. In this case, it's Pacific time. So next steps, again, this is, we're just getting started and we're working on getting to the point of an actual BCOP. We think it's pretty critical to have some implementation out there in the world that people can bang on and look at to further understand what it is we're working with and to encourage adoption. So we want to create some libraries and as well as example scripts to implement these extensions and then do some interesting things with them. We want to document this work and the extensions and then circulate that through the community for input. Our near-term goal is to publish a BCOP document. And because we're extending an RFC, we think the ultimate destination for this effort is to standardize the extensions that we're proposing through the RFC process. So to do all this, we need your help. Everyone's welcome to participate. We're looking in particular for people from the carrier community, ISPs, IX operators to get involved. We could use your voices in this process. It's helpful to understand if what we're talking about isn't really possible for you to do. It's useful to know. We're also looking for people that have coding experience, especially if you worked with iCal before. That's would be of a great benefit. To participate, we've got a Facebook group going. You can search for it on Facebook, Maintenance Notification BCOP. There's also a URL there in the presentation you can use if you want. We hold bi-weekly conference calls to check up on status and discuss things live as well. I want to thank everyone who's been involved in this effort so far. We've got a good number of SMEs from a number of different organizations who participated and supported this effort. Feel free to reach out on Facebook. That's a great place to discuss. Happy to take comments and questions here today or anywhere at the conference. And if you want to, you're welcome to reach out via email directly to me. Thanks. Is this so great and awesome that everybody just wants this? And that's why there's nothing said?
They're coding.
They're coding. All right.
Eric,
Hey.
Chris Cowart from Box.
Good
You
to see you.
mentioned, yeah, you too. You alluded to CalDAV or WebDAV or something like that, maybe being one approach to security. Has there been any consideration to whether in RFC parlance messages should be PGP signed, or whether DKIM should be validated over maintenance notifications, or any other ideas around cryptography?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So the implication here is if we can automate the processing of these messages, in theory, it's possible to use that as an input into a system that takes some administrative action on our networks. So for example, if we get a notification from a provider saying such and such a peer is going to go down at such and such a time, you could drain traffic off that peer in advance of the notification, take it out of service, and then after the maintenance is completed and you verify that the peer is returned to service, then put traffic back on that session. Okay, well, obviously there's some security implications for that. We all get that. The current effort, we're working on formatting the information. We're not really focused on what you can do with it. We're trying to separate the format of the content from the issues of transport and utilization, but that's definitely a valid concern. And PGP signing of the email is a great potential way to handle that. WebDAV is another mechanism, accessing that information over HTTPS. It's possible to do the same kind of verification of the information you're getting with this cryptography and that mechanism as well. So we think there are potential solutions to those problems if things go in that direction. And that's why I mentioned CalDAV specifically. And if people have feedback or comments on the security implications of that, I think that's something very important to consider at this stage of the game as well. One thing I want to note about all of that, unfortunately today, I don't think I've seen a single maintenance notification email PGP signed or encrypted. So at a minimum, we're not making the problem worse just by formatting the data. That problem already exists. Certainly, it's possible to create a real issue out of this if you take automatic action based on that information without some kind of means of verification.
Is there any internationalization effort to make this support for multiple languages and automatic selection of these languages? Because if you're a global network, you operate in how many languages? That's quite a complex challenge, and I have no idea how to get this done, but it has to be done.
Yeah, it's a good point. So in terms of multiple programming language support, iCal is already available, or there are libraries that can speak and read iCal in many different languages. So if we're building off that protocol to start, that's a help. For what we're trying to work on, we're demoing it in Python at the moment, and we would like to see other people hopefully contribute implementations in other computer languages as well. In terms of natural languages, I don't know if that's a question as well that you have. Okay, yeah, boy. I don't have any immediate answer, and that's not an issue we've discussed, so I'd love for you to participate if you have ideas or any suggestions on what we might be able to do in that area.
I see that it can cause a lot of pain, but if you just opt out for plain English, in some cases, your framework would not be just acceptable for many network operators that are out there. Plus, I'm looking at the list of the persons who got cream de la cream of Python hackers.
Good to know. Yeah, so that's why we're here, is to get more input and more participants. I think those are very valid points, and we'd love to see people participate to try to address them. Great, anything else? All right, feel free to reach out during the rest of the conference if things come up or online. Thanks.
There we go. Just quickly on the other two, unless there's shepherds or SMEs in the room that want to talk about the eBGP or the public peering, those are kind of just moving along. I would say if you're interested in those two topics, definitely take a look at the drafts that are currently in progress. Obviously, most of the work that happens on these documents, as you just heard from both these presentations, happens on mailing lists or on conference calls or in person. And here we're kind of just talking about progress and things. eBGP configuration has hit a little bit of a wall, potentially. There's a kind of a decision point there. The IETF just published a BCP that covers almost all the things we were trying to cover in this document. So there's a question there of, do we step back now and not write the BCOP, since the BCP has been written and published as an RFC from the IETF? Or because we want these to be living documents and maybe change faster than what we've typically seen from the IETF, do we still go ahead and write it, reference the existing document, and keep moving? So that's kind of the existing question right now. So if you have thoughts on that, definitely jump on bcop@nanog.org and let us know. Or you can find, again, the list of the shepherds and SMEs on bcop.nanog.org and talk to those folks directly. They're probably here as well. The public peering exchange participant is another one that's kind of moving along. Basically, we updated an older document that talked about both how to set up an exchange and also how to participate in one, kind of a little bit of both sides of it. And we decided to split that out in this second version. So this is one of the first documents we've seen really that living part of the living document part happen, where we took a document that we wrote, said, well, we can do better. One of them split off, and the Euro-IX folks wrote up a really nice BCOP. So we kind of said, okay, that's the BCOP that we're going to point to for setting up an exchange. And the new update for the NANOG BCOP is focusing on how do you participate well at an exchange. So again, if that's something you know about or need information on, definitely check out that BCOP. Before I jump to the next, we also have Marike in the room who's working on some really cool BCP 38 type anti-spoofing, filtering type things. So if you want to have a few words of what you're working on, that'd be cool. Hopefully I didn't put you on the spot too much.
Oh, no. Aaron just walked back and said, hey, you want to talk about it? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I don't like using the words BCP 38 because people globally don't really understand what that means. So, oh, you want me to go? Fine.
You're all right, you're all right.
Okay. So this is work that I started, about a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago. I was sitting at a RIPE meeting, and I was having lunch with a bunch of different folks from different ISPs from around the world, actually, representing the APNIC region, the RIPE region, and the ARIN region. And we started talking about, wow, there's still spoof traffic. And so I said, it's kind of funny because everybody talks about BCP 38. I certainly remember being in Japan and people, listening to somebody talk about BCP 38, and I stopped the speaker and said, sorry, but hold on a second. How many of you know what BCP 38 is? Everybody kind of looking at me funny. And I said, how many of you do anti-spoof filtering? Everybody raised their hands, right? And so one of the things that we've recognized as we've been talking to people about, the DDoSes that are happening and other malicious traffic where people are spoofing, that there are mechanisms to do anti-spoofing. However, depending on the equipment that you use, depending on which methodologies you use, and there's a lot of new people coming into the industry all the time. And so it became clear that it'd be useful to have kind of a cookbook type of document, right? Not the fact that spoofing still exists, but how can you actually mitigate it in your environments? So what kind of equipment problems have people seen where you put a 2-line access list in and the equipment just falls over, right? And some of these bugs haven't been fixed in 10 years. They're legacy equipment that still exists in people's environment. So, there's random people that were working also in Juniper, Cisco, Alcatel-Lucent who, talked about a bunch of these bugs. So I'm trying to capture them all in a document. And I've corralled a couple of people. I've also trolled the NANOG list last year for the 200 or 300 messages that dealt with the BCP 38 and spoofing trend. And so people that were clueful and said something clueful, not just the +1, and yeah, that's a problem, and yeah, nobody's doing anything about it. I don't care about those statements. I care about the statements that says, equipment this still has an issue, so we do X, Y, Z. And so this document is meant to actually show how you can do anti-spoofing using either FlowSpec, Savvy, route filters, packet filters, URPF, and also showing what kind of caveats there are with different kinds of equipment. And so since I'm the main author and it's purely volunteer work, I think I've sent Aaron about 10 messages over the last year going, oh yeah, just another week, I'll ship it out, right? However, about 2 months ago, I was in Singapore for the ICANN meeting and I ran into Barry Green, who some of you may know. He's done a lot of work with anti-spoofing, and I will say the words BCP 38. And he said, just ship what you have, the draft, and then I'll take a look at it, put in all my thoughts, and then we can ship it out. And so that's the process. That's where it's at right now. I've had a number of people ask me for this because of the fact that, everybody's very interested in the document. Of course, nobody volunteers to help write. So it is something that's been on my list of to-dos. I think it's very important work. If you are interested in contributing, ping me. My email is merike@doubleshotsecurity.com. You'll find how you spell my first name on the security track, if you didn't catch that. Ping me, because if you ping me, then I'll be like, oh man, I better get this done, because I want you guys who will ping me also, I will ping you back after the first draft is done to say, okay, where are your comments or your edits? But anyway, that's where it's at. So anybody have any questions?
My question is, why don't you make it a BCOP?
It will be a BCOP. Yeah, that's why I'm speaking here, because I was trying to figure out where it should reside, right? But because I've had so many conversations with Aaron about this specifically, I thought, having it be a BCOP, and because it's operational, right? I mean, I also contribute to the IETF. So part of it was like, well, BCP document there, but really it's an operational document. And I asked the operators that have contributed so far, that also represent the RIPE region and AP-NIC region, whether or not they had an issue with, BCOP and NANOG or whatever, and they said, we don't care. This is useful information for the community. Question?
Well, I know your pains. I actually had a national effort 2 years ago to implement BCP 38 in my region in Russia. And we realized that fundamental problem for implementing it is lack of incentive. You have to do this amount of work consistently, months to months. And you're the only one who's not benefiting of results. So I decided that we should give some benefits. And I got support from Yandex. Yandex is Russian Google, basically. And they have a lot of marketing power and PR power. And we decided, let's do not name and shaming, let's do Hall of Fame. Whoever supports the network is the best. And we basically failed at the moment where we were not able to verify if this network does in fact supports BCP 38. And frankly speaking, RIPE Atlas wasn't cooperative. They had their reasons, I see them, but there is no way to legitimately check if this network complies. And that's a problem. So you could not build this list of well-managed networks, because I think it's important when a customer makes a decision who he wants to, as his upstream, he wants not only the cheapest price, but also well-connected and, most importantly, well-managed network. And BCP 38 is clear signs that this network is well-managed, right? So I failed, and I'm not easy on failures. I'm stubborn, and I want to do something different than BCP 38. I think it's dead in the water because the URPF doesn't work the way it should be. It works fine on access level. It doesn't work on aggregation level. Take a look at Rostelecom. They connect lots of small ISPs, and small ISPs is a source of a problem here, because usually they are understaffed, they are lack of expertise, and they basically they don't give a shit. And it comes to the aggregation layer, and an aggregation layer, the telco got hundreds of thousands of prefixes that have to be filtered, and different hardware reacts differently to that. So I had this idea, if we can gather the use cases, the line card performance, amount of prefixes, and we can do an aggregation of prefix lists in a way that we extend, we aggregate prefix lists to minimal, to the amount of that line card supports without degradation, right? So we have this white holes which are not belong to the customer, but covered by our prefixes list after the aggregation. But the result will be still much better than no prefix list at all, because the way the address space was distributed between the regions gives us a good opportunity to utilize this distribution process, to leverage it in our benefit. So my estimate that only around order of magnitude less of spoot traffic will go through this sparsely aggregated prefix lists. We can also run a simulation, but we direly need data from vendors on the traffic line card performance, and we also need lab expertise and so forth and so on. There are a small company, we don't have this hardware in our lab. But
Right, let me interrupt for a minute also. So there's, I don't know how many of you are aware of the MIT Spoofer project, which was, there was actually a NANOG talk about how it worked, some of the caveats but it was one way to measure whether or not an ISP was, or an entity was actually doing anti-spoof filtering. And they recently, they've been lobbying to actually enhance that work. And from what I've heard is they will be doing that. And you were in the other session, the security
No.
one. So DKIC's actually, the person that spoke in the security session, he's also very interested in doing spoofing, or anti-spoofing rather. And in the internet exchange world, Matthew Lucky, who is the guy, the researcher that's working for CADA, I actually put him in touch with URIX because he wanted to see how he could work with internet exchanges also to get measurements for anti-spoofing and what people were doing. And I think your comment earlier is right on the mark. I mean, I'm not somebody that believes in shaming. I don't think that's the right approach. But I think recognizing where anti-spoofing is done effectively, and then also seeing what are the mechanisms that work, because, you know, as ISPs, you want traffic to go from point A to point B, right? You never, ever want to block something that could be legitimate traffic. And so figuring that out, building a document that, you know, it'll be a living document, seeing what are the different mechanisms that work in people's environments, and something that people aren't always aware of. I mean, I've been going to the IETF for a very long time, and this guy Pekka Savola from Finland, who actually just recently got a legal degree. He's now a lawyer, which I find very cool and interesting. But he had actually written a document that never became a full RFC, but it's still in draft form out there. And there's BCP 84, which basically looked at BCP 38, but in a asymmetric
yes.
environment. And so Pekka Savola actually wrote a document on experiences with using BCP 84. And it's still a really relevant document. And so if you're looking at how to do anti-spoofing and looking at, you know, how you do that via URPF or any kind of filtering, then that document is kind of a good read, I think.
Well, it's only possible if we as a community can adopt policy, no advertisement, no service. This means if I don't see your prefixes in advertisement, you can't expect me to handle your outgoing traffic, right? And it's just never going to happen. It's standard practice, and you should not fight the society and its current structure. You should just adopt it. So I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, so
very
I really
pessimistic.
hope that when the document, the draft actually is advertised in the BCOP mailing list, that you will, you know, comment on it. And maybe, you know, we can work on an added use case if you have one that's not covered there. But, you know, again, I've been saying this for a long time. However, this has been on top of my list for probably 2 months now. And because Barry Green also has offered to help and he has a lot of experience, I want the document to also go to him beforehand, and then we send it out. And quite frankly, one of my concerns has been, as I look at the other BCOP documents and talking to Barry, we wanted to structure this one quite differently than the other ones that have already been written. Because from our collective experience, right, at least understanding all the different technologies and just all the caveats, well, it'll be in a little bit of a different format, but we hope it'll be useful.
Okay, and last question, you said that you already figured out how to check this BCP 38, well, ingress filtering, URPF enabled networks. You have to generate the packet, right? And this packet have to have spoofed IP address. So most of the sensor networks would not allow you to do that because it's legally gray area, right? So it raises the next question. My company does research on BGP connectivity, and we send a lot of packets in V4 and V6 address space, and we get all this attention from the crazy people. But we also declare why we do that clearly, and what we do to that this data doesn't fall in wrong hands. Our verification process, we state it clearly, but still we still get a lot of critics, and probably we will get lawsuits coming. So the question is, if we do this scanning, how can we work the legislation in a way that it's not a gray area anymore? If you're research, because bad guys will do it anyway. legal or not legal, they will do it anyway. And we are the guys that stopping the bad guys. So how we can move the legislation that it's not a gray area anymore? Any ideas?
Honestly, I have absolutely no idea. However, I would encourage you to get in touch with Jared March, because he showed me some of the interesting letters that he got when he did the Open DNS resolver scans and the NTP scans, and yeah, it was quite fascinating, right? So, yeah, but I have no answer to that.
Okay, let's have a follow-up letter. Thank you. Very nice discussion.
Just a quick point on that particular topic is there are some active efforts for a slightly different kind of BCOP, which is being worked through the IGF. So this is a UN-funded open IGF ability to write things for businesses and for governments and for things like spurring economic growth and for educating our own local and regional governments. So if you have, if you're willing to put an effort for that kind of thing, you can also help by starting to write, outlines for the BCOP group for the IGF as well. And that's really focused on, educating our governments, not just the technical pieces.
Well, I don't think that was my citizenship. I'm the proper person to do that. However, you can have my words that I will advocate for the practices on my local IGF with my government. And it seems like currently we're in stage, yes, our government is heavy-handed, but they realize that this is not the way to go on internet regulation. So there is a actual living discussion goes on. And it seems like they're listening, so. Thank you.
One second. Laptop's gone to sleep. Let's come back. So that kind of concludes all of the documents we're going to talk about today. And as I load this back up here, one of the last things I wanted to talk about before we let go, one of the things we've been talking about among the BCOP committee for quite a while now, and more so lately, we're seeing, obviously we have a steady stream of documents coming through, but there's a lot of things that need to be written down. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there, and what we really want to understand a little bit better is, as engineers, right, understand that documentation is probably not your favorite thing, may even be close to your least favorite thing to do. So I'd really like some input on, folks in this room. Two things. One, first of all, I want to just make sure that everyone here is probably qualified to contribute to a BCOP. The things that you think are common sense are not. The things you've been doing for years, the things you do every day on your network, are unique skills and unique knowledge that can and should be shared with other folks. There's DNS guys who don't know about routing, there's routing guys who don't know about VMs, and all around. And there's people all in the rest of the world who don't have the experience that some of the folks who have worked at companies for 10, 15, 20 years here have, or even a couple of years. So first of all, this is talking to everyone. And the second thing is, how do I get you to come write more documents? I think we're doing well, we're moving along, but there's a lot more. So yeah, I mean, literally, as prizes, T-shirts, names on banners, are there things that would make this more appealing to you? Publishing them as RFCs at the IETF level. Is there some way to make this more appealing to you or to your friends that'll help motivate more documents being created? Any ideas? How do you get your staff to write documents? Can you pay them? I guess?
Wisdom comes through suffering.
Hi, Ryan, I'm an internet enthusiast and solutions architect. Also, I work for DataLink, or a reseller. Many of these small tier 3 and tier 4 companies will hire companies like me, well, not me, but I work for the company, to evaluate their network and present to them, what are the best common practices for their network. So a lot of this documentation is, out there, engineering consultants, resellers, value-added resellers, it's out there, but it's, not our bread and butter, right, but it's, you know, it's definitely a revenue source. But this is, you know, I have an interest in producing this information for my customers so that, you know, once I've got it, I can just cookie cut it or just hand it to them because it makes their job easier. So, you know, I wouldn't mind participating in some of this stuff. I've got a lot of this information already collected and aggregated and written up fairly nicely. So I'd love to join and help out.
Awesome, thanks, please do. And that's another good point, right? I mean, if this is already written down, we don't have to rewrite it, right? There's some things out there where we can point to things and just have pointers or bring stuff in, reformat, whatever it may be, dust it off and bring it up. That's a really good point as well. That, you know, a lot of this isn't just in your head, maybe some of it's already written down, so it makes it easier. Any ideas, any things? I mean, that may motivate you? No?
I feel motivated.
Excellent. Treadmills. The other thing is I wanted to mention before we wrap up here that this isn't just a NANOG thing that's going on. BCOP efforts have started around the world. There's one here at NANOG, obviously. RIPE has now a BCOP task force, which works with their other task forces to document stuff. And they've just recently published their first document. I mean, RIPE has been publishing documents for quite a while, but their first BCOP document. LACNOG and AFNOG both have started efforts within those communities to, and they've all kind of followed alongside of NOGs. And there's also several smaller NOGs around the world. The Polish Network Operators Group, PLNOG, in Japan, JANOG, and several others have kind of taken on this effort to either work on documents actively or also translate documents into their native language to help out with that. Then the next part of that is the IETF meeting is coming up in Prague in end of June, beginning of July, and we're going to have a meeting there to talk about kind of coordinating all of those groups globally. Because hopefully this is the internet, it should work pretty similarly most of the world, right? So a document we write here should be applicable in Asia, and then a document written in Brazil should be applicable in Germany. But how do we publish those in a way that everyone knows where they're at and can coalesce on those? So we're kind of working those details out. Working locally and then moving it up and having maybe a secondary committee, maybe the members of committees at the regional level form a larger committee at the top, things like that, maybe publishing them as RFCs, all that. So if you're interested in those discussions as well, and kind of the logistics of how to put this whole thing together at a global level and then create a global repository of documents, or at least maybe just a global pointers to the repositories that are local, or how that all works out, that's another thing that we're interested in hearing more about and discussing, either right now, potentially, or on the BCOP list also. And so there's all the links. Again, most of this is just fed off of bcop.nanog.org, and the mailing list is bcop@nanog.org, which is a standard mailman list, so you can join that if you'd like. Any final questions or comments before we wrap up? If you found this useful, I would highly appreciate you letting your favorite board member know. And the next NANOG meeting also, there's elections for those positions. Anything? And with that, I think it's lunchtime. Thanks, everybody.